welcome everyone to week 6 of our circle season. We just ended out our Bridges series and we kicked off this Sunday with a multi-speaker Sunday. And so I just want to take some time to honor Brandy, Blaine, and Michael for bringing the word to us this Sunday. I know that's something that's so hard, so nerve-wracking, stumbling upon your own words, which I'll probably do throughout this video. But I'm just thankful for a spiritual family that's taking next steps. And that's not only taking those next steps, but that's encouraging others around them to take next steps. So thank you, Brandy, Blaine, and Michael, for the word that you brought this Sunday. And today, I want to talk about a story in the Bible that talks about those three things, that shows those three things. And I also want to have some challenging questions at the end that you can discuss during your circle. And when I think about order and obedience and sacrifice, I can't help but think of Abraham and his son Isaac. And many of you might know this story because it was talked a lot about on a felt board growing up. But if you don't, that's okay. Because Abraham, he was about 100 years old when he had his first son. That's crazy to think about. And God challenges him in a way to sacrifice his only son to him. And so Abraham makes the arrangements, he gets everything that he needs, and he sets off. And then he climbs a mountain where God told him to go. And as soon as he takes out the knife to sacrifice his only son, an angel stops him. And behold, there's a ram caught in the thickets that would take the place of his son. That would be the sacrifice. And there's so many things that we could take out of the story of Abraham and Isaac, but I want to focus on these three things that we talked about on Sunday. Because Abraham knew something that we sometimes know, but sometimes need to grow in. That God blesses order, God blesses obedience, and God blesses sacrifice. And we can see that Abraham knows that God blesses order because Abraham prioritized God over everything, even his own family, which is so hard for me to think about because I love my family deeply. And I care about them. But there's times when God's going to ask us to do things that maybe our family doesn't agree with. And we're going to have to do what God says to do. The second thing is we see that Abraham knows that God blesses sacrifice. Abraham knew that God would restore everything plus some that he gave to God. And actually you see in the story in Genesis, as they're marching up the hill to the final place where Isaac would have been sacrificed, Isaac asks the question, we have everything we need except the sacrifice. What are we doing, Dad? Right? But Abraham says something. He says, God will provide the sacrifice. Abraham was expectant. You could tell from this story that Abraham had sacrificed before and he knew that God was going to provide something on the other side. And he actually ends up naming that mountain a word that means God will provide. It's crazy. And the last thing that we see that Abraham knows that God blesses is obedience. He's willing to do what God says, even if it sounds crazy, even if it makes no sense. Because you see, years before, in Genesis chapter 17, you'll find a story where God promises Abraham that he's going to make him a father of many nations. And then he has his son, and now God's asking him to sacrifice his son. This doesn't make any sense. God, if I'm going to get to the promise of being a father of many nations, Why are you asking me to sacrifice my only son? Sometimes we have to do things that don't make sense to us, but make sense to God. And I think if we learn to grow in these three areas, these three things of order, obedience, and sacrifice, we can see God do so much greater things on the other side of it. So here's your questions for this week. I pray that y'all guys have a great time in circle, have good conversation. The first question is this: talk about a time when your life was out of order. Number 2, what is God challenging you to sacrifice? And number 3, what's one step of obedience that you can take this week? I just want to thank you for joining us for Circles. I pray that you have an incredible time and a great conversation. We love you, and we'll see you soon.